Well, good day to you. It is February the 27th. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing. I want to welcome everyone to Search for Signs. And I also want to point out, if you want to know more about Maitreya, if you have questions about who and what Maitreya is, what he means for humanity after hearing these videos, those kind of things, why are these masters coming back after eons upon eons of living away from humanity and those kind of things, about the priorities of Maitreya, hopefully you'll take it a step further. Check out the links in the description portion of these videos. Click on some of those links and read some of the information on those websites, because every one of those websites talk about this information in some way. Some more directly about who and what Maitreya is, like the Sharon National site. Others indirectly about his priorities or about the many miracle signs and those kind of things. So if you want to know more, you can answer your questions, and you have questions, you can answer some of those questions yourself by just doing that. If you want to join the discussion, post comments, post your questions in the comments section, email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. I'll discuss it in the next video. Maybe we can learn more about it that way. I have been finding that it's been really inspirational to get articles from people, because people have been sending me more and more articles that pertain to what we talk about here in some way, whether it's about what people are doing about the priorities of Maitreya, some of the technological advances that are part of the priorities of Maitreya, to some of the strange phenomena that may or may not be a miracle sign. I don't know. But it at least is a sign that the people who are listening to this information, it's starting to click. And you're starting to see some of the things out there. So I really am very grateful when you guys send me articles. And then I'll put them up on Facebook and other people repost them and so forth. So I really want to thank Ashwak Radati and is it Jesus Bora? Let me go back to Facebook and see. Yeah, Jesus Bora for sharing some posts. I really do appreciate that, guys. Had some comments and some questions come my way from Ricardo Pelswasali, Tudor Manor, and Ray Ray. Thanks, guys, for doing that as well. All right. Now, Ricardo Pelswasali, you said something that kind of pertains to what I was just talking about going to some websites and learning more about this information. But what you have to say about learning more about what we talk about here? The truth does not always avail itself. Alas, read, read, read. Learn, 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 and therefore educate yourself. My teachers always advised me to read more than one book. It just might enlighten us upon the path to a greater knowledge, which at present very few indeed possess. Find that inner truth and make that manifest. So thank you very much for that. Now, Ray, you had one question and one comment. I am going to try to answer your question first and then address the comments second. How about that? So the question you asked, could you tell me of a network that has done an interview, I'm assuming with Maitreya, right? And maybe a month it occurred. So I can't and I won't. Now I'm going to explain why. Whether you get this or not, it's totally on you, right? Because most of the time when I'm asked this question in some way and I try to answer it to help them out, some people can get pretty upset that I answered it the way that I answered it. So I'm gonna try to answer it as truthfully as I can. If you get upset with what I have to say because I'm not answering it the way you want me to answer it, I'm sorry. But this is what it is. Okay, so I can't, because I don't think I've seen Maitreya on TV yet, and I won't when I do recognize him on TV, because I was told by Benjamin Creme not to. And not only me, but anybody that comes across an interview that they think is Maitreya, Benjamin Creme said to the effect of, it is vitally important to not point out who we think Maitreya is when we think we recognized him on TV. Just keep your mouth shut. Now, why? And this is where people get into the, they get upset when I try to answer this way, because perhaps they didn't trust Ben the way that I trusted Ben. So I'm taking this on what Ben said, but the way he said it, how he said it, it makes sense to me. So, and it has the ring of truth for me. But he said it's important to not point out who Maitreya is once we think we recognize Maitreya, because of two reasons. One, you would be robbing that other person of this heartfelt awakening in response to recognizing Maitreya. It's a gift that happens for that person when they finally see Maitreya on TV and recognize Maitreya and go, that is Maitreya. It will do something to the person. A very positive thing. It might even rock them to the core to where it actually changes the way that they view life and themselves. You know what I'm saying? And you'd be robbing them of that experience if you just told them that that was Maitreya. The other reason is, and I'm going to pose this as a question back to any one of you who want to see Maitreya on TV and want to be told that that's him. Ask yourself this question. Why would Maitreya, if Maitreya is who I think he is and who Benjamin Creme said he was and so forth, the one awaited by all the world's religions, the world teacher for all humanity, a master of all the masters, the head of the spiritual hierarchy, whatever, if you know what that means and the importance of that, and is now finally, after long last, speaking on TV. If he's still not saying who he is, why? You know what I'm saying? Why would he not be saying this? Now, some people try to answer that question. They don't understand this information. They don't trust this information. They don't trust who and what Maitreya is. And they say he's not saying who he is because he's hiding from them or hiding something from them. But that's not true. The reason why he is not saying who he is so that every person who hears him and here's what he's saying that we should do as a humanity, right? Starting with the principle of sharing, right? Will have the freedom to be able to ask themselves and say to themselves or whatever, do I want what he's saying, or do I not? You know, and be free to be able to do both. If you know that that is Maitreya, the answer to that question, if somebody asked that to themselves and they were told that that was Maitreya, it might cloud their judgment. It might make them prejudiced toward what he's saying, to, you know, for or against, you know, those kind of things. So there would be people, if they knew that that was Maitreya, would say, I agree with what he's saying because that is Maitreya. They might not put it to themselves like that, but that's exactly what's going on. They would just follow along with it because that's who Maitreya is. That's Maitreya, you know, or that's the awaited Christ or the Imam Mahdi or whoever, right? If they were told that, they would, and they were told that by somebody that they trust, they might actually listen to him harder, believe what he had to say more because that's who it is. And it wouldn't do that person any good. It wouldn't do the world any good. And then there would also be people on the other side that would totally be against what he had to say because they think he's the Antichrist. So it's best just to let any one of us, including yourself, sit there in the sofa or in the chair or wherever, hear what Maitreya has to say, and not know that that's Maitreya, but be able to ask yourself that question. Do I like what he has to say? Do I want what he has to say? You know, he's advocating or not, and be free to be able to do both. So that's why just best just not to say anything. Now, you guys might not see or believe this information as I believe this information because I've had the experiences that I've had that lead me to believe that this is 100% true and accurate. You know, and that's fine, right? But, you know, how do I put this? I believe, let me just say it like that. I believe that without a doubt that we will all eventually see Maitreya on TV. Perhaps at that time not know that that's Maitreya on TV. And I do think that there are people who are hearing this information and don't even remember even seeing Maitreya on TV. And have already seen him. But I know without a doubt that at some point, every single man, woman in this planet will know that that is Maitreya at the same time. And will hear about it at the exact same time on the day of declaration. And according to Benjamin Creme, the day of declaration will happen, you know, after everyone is kind of starting to be inspired by what this person is saying on TV, not knowing it's Maitreya perhaps or whatever, and will ask and demand from our news media him an opportunity to speak to all of us. We will demand it from our media. He will then be invited by the media to come out. Every single major network will be linked at the same time to this. So it doesn't matter what channel you're watching, you will see him speaking on TV. Every single person above the age of 14 will hear what he has to say, but they will not hear what he's saying coming through their speakers. They'll hear it inwardly in their own head. And they'll hear it in whatever language is easiest for them to understand what he's saying without misinterpreting what he's saying. Everybody under the age of 14 will not have that experience, but they might experience some of the other miracles that will happen. There'll be 2 other miracles that will happen on that day. So that would be quite an extraordinary event. And then he will declare who he is for all of us at the exact same time. So you don't have to worry about it. You'll know. Okay, so the other two things that will happen, there will be millions upon millions of spontaneous cures and healings from people all over the world that were not expected to recover from whatever ailment or accident that they had or whatever like that. They'll be healed perfectly. And then the other one, Maitreya said himself, it will be as if he embraces all of humanity. We'll feel his love even physically. And I'm sure that even those who are not hearing his words in their own head because they're too young will even have that same experience. And those three things, and only those three things, according to Benjamin Creme, is the reason why we'll know that that man, and only that man, is Maitreya. Up until that point, we won't know for sure. We might have a really good, strong guess that that's him, but we still will have this in the back of our mind, maybe that's not him, right? Or whatever, right? Now, the other thing I want to say, and this is some other hints for you, okay, is anyone who claims to be Maitreya up until that point is not Maitreya. It doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter how they believe themselves to be Maitreya. Maitreya will not declare himself as Maitreya. When he's asked, he will not say yes or no. Raj Batal is a good example of someone who said, I'm not Maitreya, right? So, he will find a way to skirt around the question to not answer it directly. Up until that point, anybody that talks about who and what they think Maitreya is, it's best to not engage in discussion with them. I will quash any comments or questions that come my way when people start to really recognize Maitreya. And the only thing that Benjamin Creme said that we were supposed to say if somebody asked us, we're supposed to throw a question back at them. What do you think? And let them kind of ponder on it that way. But that's it. The other thing I would say is if you wanted a month in a network, right? The only thing I can say, and this is just because Benjamin Creme said it himself, because he made the announcement in January of 2010 that Maitreya had already given an interview on a major American television network. Now, it didn't mean that it happened in January of 2010. It didn't mean that it happened in December of 2009. It could have happened months before that. I don't know. But he gave an interview on a major television, U.S. television network sometime not immediately, but sometime right before January 2010. So that's all I can say. And then the other hint is, like I said, anybody that says he's Maitreya is not Maitreya. So anyway, let that be your guide. And the more you know about it, and the more you understand this information and educate yourself better about this information, the easier it will be to recognize Maitreya. The easier it will be for you to want for the world what he's advocating for the world and those kind of things. So hopefully that answers that question. Now, the other comment that you were talking about here, I don't know if you came across this yourself and just commented this way because you had thought about this for yourself, or you listened to the video that I was talking about this a few videos ago, but I've had the same thought myself. What did you have to say? Alice Bailey helped found the Lucis Trust. Interesting name considering what people might associate it with. I couldn't have said it better myself. Now, the only thing that I can say about this is that, I'm not a part of the Alice Bailey group, so I'm not for sure. I'm just guessing, okay? But two things could have happened. One, that word Lucifer did not mean what we think it means, what most people think it means today, back then. Perhaps it wasn't as popular of a view and more widely, agreed upon that it means Satan then than it does today. I don't know. That's one possibility. The other one is they were trying in their own way to change the vernacular of what that word means. But the only thing I can say for certain is they were not talking about Satan in the way that religious people think that they were talking about. Because according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings and according to the ancients, Lucifer means bringer of light. It's Latin. They looked to the stars in the sky and they saw Venus in the sky, which is a pretty bright image in this, figure in the sky, right? And they called it Lucifer. It means bringer of light. And that was put in the Bible for, whatever reason they were trying to use that as a symbol for something. And people over the centuries eventually started to make it mean, and then they got other people to agree upon it, that means Satan. But it doesn't, actually. And that's not even what it was meant in the Bible to mean, right? Just as Satan is not a person, it's not a fallen angel from heaven, as so many people believe. It's the selfish nature of all of us is what they're talking about. So if you look at, if you read the Bible, and anytime they use the word Satan, you put in parentheses the selfish nature of myself and all of humanity or whatever, right? It might make a little bit more sense. So like Paul, when he was talking about, even Satan can disguise himself as an angel of light. If you inserted it as even my most highest and most lofty ideals, most things that I think I'm doing the most good in the world, could actually be selfish, it might make a little bit more sense. Just an alternate view of looking at what he said, right? Now, I also am kind of aware enough and smart enough to know that you don't say certain things to certain people because it triggers them, right? But that's because I'm living during this time. 100 or so years ago, during the time of Alice Bailey, perhaps that's not what people were cared about, right? Perhaps if you use the kind of the term political correctness or PC, they might not understand what you were talking about. What are you talking about? But people always, up until relatively recently, people were walking around saying all sorts of stuff, right? Perhaps hurting people's feelings all the time and not even realizing they were hurting people's feelings. Writing about things that trigger people emotionally, and they had no idea that they were doing it that way, right? And then somebody started saying, well, maybe we should be a little bit more politically correct. That's a relatively new phenomenon, right? Like I said, that's one person's way, me being the one person, right, view on why they would use Lucifer Publishing as a name for a publishing company, right? But the problem is, given the way people are today, just using a word like Lucifer Publishing, they don't even hear what you have to say after that, because they've already made up their mind based on that one word. People are basically so lazy and so conditioned and so pigeonholed in their own beliefs on things that they can't see anything other than, once they hear that word, that's it. You're now talking about Satan publishing all your books, right? When that's not what they were talking about at all. But like I said, perhaps they weren't as sensitive about that stuff back then. I don't know, right? But the one thing that I would say too, because especially today with all this talk about wokeness, right? People are looking back at previous generations and how they thought, how they related to one another, and they're very critical and judgmental of it, right? Perhaps we should have a different view of some of our political and historical figures. Maybe they weren't perfect, right? And even looking at Jesus in that same way, right? But looking at people like, our founding fathers of our country, we idolized them, we pedalized them to a way that and educated our young about that over the last 200 years up until recently, right? Perhaps maybe they weren't perfect, but I don't think they were all bad either because of some of the things that they did or said or whatever. You know what I mean? So like looking at my daughter, and I've talked about this before, about this very thing, because I'm trying to pose this question, not looking at it in terms of the past, but looking at it in terms of the future, right? Is what are the generations of the future going to say, and how are they going to be critical about what we're doing today and how we're relating to each other today, how we're treating each other today? Won't they have those same kind of critiques? My daughter is like any other teenager. She thinks she's got it all wrapped up in a bow and it's all perfect, and she knows, and the previous generations didn't have a clue, right? I was the same way. I'm sure if you were honest enough with yourself, you probably had the same view on life when you were a teenager, right? You make it to a certain point and your parents don't know anything, right? Or you're, whatever, and you're right. And that's the way she sees it. So when I talk about George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, I admire Thomas Jefferson. I don't idolize the guy, but I admire him. I mean, he was a Renaissance man, an inventor, an architect, a politician, an ambassador to another. I mean, incredible person. And yet he owned slaves, I remember watching Oprah Winfrey show years upon years ago, and Malcolm Forbes had a bottle of wine that Thomas Jefferson owned, and he had two letters framed right next to the bottle of wine on his wall. One was a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to his wife about the dangers of drinking alcohol, and the other one was a letter he wrote to Sally, I can't remember her name, but anyway, his mistress, who was a slave also, about how much he couldn't wait to meet her again and see her again and drink a bottle of wine with her. I mean, it showed the dichotomy and sometimes the psychopathic nature to it, for lack of a better word, of somebody at the level of Thomas Jefferson, right? Who was very advanced for humanity, but yet still had a lot of human qualities to himself. So he had both going on, right? But to be able to write a letter to his wife one way and then turn around and write a letter to his mistress another way about a bottle of wine, the same thing, right? But the thing that I would say is, what are the generations of the future going to say about us? And this is the question I posed to my daughter, and I'm posing it to everyone who's listening to this. What are they going to say about us? Are they going to give us a pass on destroying the environment, putting in jeopardy the very future of humanity on this planet? And not only humanity, but the animal kingdom and the vegetable and the plant kingdom. All of life on planet Earth is in jeopardy now by the way we're treating our environment. And there are some people who really care about it, and those are people who just are in blind ignorance about what we're doing and don't care. And speak out that we should keep doing the same thing, right? So, you know what I mean? What are they going to be saying about us in that way? What are they also going to be saying about the fact that we're living in a world where people are literally dying of hunger in a world where we have plenty of food? What are they going to be saying about us? And I've said this to my daughter. I mean, you can be as critical as you can about Christopher Columbus or whoever, right? But what are they going to be saying about all of us? And I think they're going to be saying, and I'm just guessing, but it's an educated guess, they're going to be saying, what the hell were you guys thinking? How could you live so separately from one another, right? Thinking that what you're doing doesn't affect them, and them dying of hunger doesn't affect you, and you could cut down as many trees as you want, and you could use as much nuclear energy as you want, and it's killing everybody off. What were you thinking? They're going to have the same questions of how they just can't believe it, because we are living in this world where we're all ignorant of the laws of life. We're ignorant of the fact that we are one. We're living our lives so separately and hurting one another, whether we're aware of it or not. It's all the same thing. It all goes back to what you were just talking about, right? So the other thing, too, that's maybe perhaps a little bit more hopeful, right? And I'll end it on a high note, right? Benjamin Creme's master said, from the master's point of view, the progress of humanity is just going at lightning pace. They are having a hard time keeping up with how fast things are going. And who and what you were talking about, the Lucius Trust people, right? That was only 100 or so years ago. The Victorian age was only 100 or so years ago, right? Slavery existed in this country, 150, 160 years ago? That's not a very long time. And now it's ended, right? And now we've had all the problems of civil rights and all these kind of things. But how far we've come since then, but how far we have to go, right? And how far we will go. But the progress of the future generations, when we look back on it, will be much quicker than even what's happened over the last 160, 170 years. So that's the good news, right? But anyway, thank you very much for your comments, guys, and your questions. I really appreciate it. I love everyone. You guys take care. I look forward to more comments and questions in the future. Have a wonderful day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.